Boa tarde. We'll be speaking in English because we have one of the persons that will be speaking is Dutch, so we have to speak English. I hope everybody understands it, but if you have to in the part of having questions, you can do it in Portuguese if you want, and we will translate. So, my name is Nuno Artur Silva, and I'll be the moderator. And I hope you have the program, so I don't have to make the complete presentation of everybody. But I will start by Tamara. Tamara, she is a scriptwriter, an author, and she has a lot of books and films made, and she will talk about the experience she has in Holland, and about how they not only did the books and children books, but also how they become important in the children's cinema too. We'll be talking about that too. Maria Emilia Brederode, she has a lot of things that we can use as a pretext to speak about the experience with children. And from the start, she was the main author and consultant of Rua Sésamo in Portugal, the famous series that national TV broadcast for a long time and has a great impact in the generation of people who were child at that time, but also lots of work Maria Emilia have been doing with education and art and culture for a long time. We'll be talking about that too. And Possidónio Cachapa is a writer, script writer too. He was the director of Indie Junior for some time. And so the team we will be talking, of course, will be children's literature. What's that? Literature for children. And I'll start with Tamara and we'll start getting a connection with the previous debate that was about cinema. And I'll be asking her what happened in Holland that changed completely from a place where there was almost no movies for children, and now has become an important sector of cinema industry, children's movies, since 25 years ago, I think.
Yeah, I think 1990, yeah, 98 it was.
Okay,
90, yeah.
So 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So what happened?
What happened? Well, actually, in Holland at that time, we didn't make a lot of children films, and there was a tradition in Holland that every family at Christmas went to the cinema to see a Disney film. And my father, who was a producer but a writer and also working for the broadcast, he said, it's really strange that Dutch families are going to watch American animated films. Why are they not going to watch our own films? And at that time, also the grown-up industry was not that big. The Dutch film was not good. A lot of people didn't go to the cinema to see Dutch films. So we really had a big problem then. And then he thought, well, actually it was 10 years before, because it took 10 years for him to finance this film. But he picked a book from a famous Dutch writer, and I like to correct, because in the program it says that I am considered the Dutch Astrid Lindgren. I'm not. But it's Annie M. G. Schmid, this writer, who was considered the Dutch Astrid Lindgren. They knew each other also. And my father thought, in Sweden they made these adaptations from these books from Astrid Lindgren. Why we should do that in Holland too? So he picked a book, and it took him 10 years to finance the film. And then he produced the film, The Flying Lift Boy, and he worked on the marketing. He went to every television show, the most terrible shows, to really sell the film. And finally, 1 million people went.
It was not an animation movie.
No. It was about a real boy who pushes on the button of an elevator and then it goes in space and it lands in South America. And it's really an adventurous story. I don't think it's the best film we made, actually, but it was a really good one in sense that 1 million people in Holland, and at that time I think we had 15 million people living in Holland, so 1 million visitors went to see this film during Christmas. And in the same time, there was a Disney film in cinema. So then other producers thought, hey, wait a minute, that's interesting. And they started to pick other books like, well, the titles are not interesting, but then it was the start of an industry. And actually, I just looked at the figures of the Dutch Film Fund. I don't know if you have a film fund in Portugal, but yeah. We have a film fund that used to give, I don't know how it's nowadays, but last 10 years before Corona, I think they spent 25% of their budget to children films. To produce children films. And if 25. Yeah.
So, but 25 years ago,
no.
that was not.
So it was hard to fight for that, but I just want to tell you that I think you have to change the mindset. And what helped in this case was that a lot of people went to watch the film and a lot of producers saw money.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and the money that was invested in the film came from culture or from economy? It was a culture support,
yeah,
or it was with economy?
I think it was both. I think in most of the time you get a part from the film fund. I think it's, I don't know, it's half of, well, maybe 5, I don't know, but it's not all the money you need. It's most of the time half of it or a third of it, but then you have to find money at other places, like you make a co-production. We get money from the broadcaster, and then we have a special fund you can get money when you are co-production with Belgium or with, so I think in this case it was Belgium, some countries invested also in this film.
And so the secret of the success was the story, and after that the other stories. There was a connection between the stories you picked. They were Dutch stories from children's books too?
Yeah, because, well, my father started with this Annie M. G. Schmid, that's her name, and she was the most famous children's book writer. She died in 1995, so she didn't got to see the film, and also not other films we made, because after that we made, I think, 5 other films, and I wrote the scripts of all those adaptations, not the first one, but the other ones. But that was marketing-wise very smart, because a lot of people knew these books, because not the children knew the books, but the parents knew the books. And parents buy tickets for films.
Okay, so the secret was convincing the state to invest money in a genre. It was not... and based on traditional or in
popular books.
Dutch writers.
Yeah, Dutch popular books, and I think
now it's a big market on that.
Yeah, it developed really strongly, and I looked at the figures. 10 years before Corona, I think we made 120 children films in 10 years, and
you exported them.
Well. And I also like to say that there's not one kind of children film. You have many different kinds of children films. Not only age, but also, like later on I would like to show some trailers, like when you make a book adaptation, it's more adventurous, for example. You can also make more an art house film, or more a film really, I like really to make films out of child's perspective. I think that's very important, and that's what my mission is also, that's why I'm here. To tell everybody that it's really important to make films for children, because it's just like literature. I think if you make good films, you can show children how the world, well, all parts of the world, you can show how people are. It's a training in empathy, I think.
Okay, so that's a good start, I think. Now we already have with us Carla Oliveira. She's an editor, basic from Orfeu.
Orfeu Negro.
Orfeu Negro, yeah.
Sorry that I was late. But
we'll be talking about literature in a while, but since we started with the cinema, we continue a little bit talking about the cinema. Now I would like to ask Possidónio, you've been the curator for Indie Junior, the director for Indie Junior, the coordinator, whatever. And what do you what's your idea about what we can do in Portugal after listening to what Tamara just said, what happened in Holland? Can we do something like that, or what's the difficulty here? We don't have children's movies. If we put animation apart, with real actors, we don't have it at all.
Okay, so just to answer your question, and it's interesting that we have someone from Netherlands because they have really strong children's cinema. I was telling our guest about that, and it's always I think there are many factors, and one of them is why is the success there? And I know a little bit about the cinema there in Scandinavian and all of those for that specific audience. And they have several factors that we are not considering here in Portugal much. One of them, it's the narrative. The narratives are always very interesting and very compelling. And I did that as a programmer. I saw many things. And they are always stories that, not always, because some movies are not that good, but I mean some of them. They have really interesting stories, and as an adult, I like to see it also. It's not just because they are totally focused on the children, but as an adult, I still like to see it. Like, just imagine it's like one of the animation films from Pixar, in that sense. They are very different, but just in that sense that children are going to the cinema and they like it, but me as an adult, I go too, because I like it, okay? So the interest of the narrative is very important. The second thing, for example, that Netherlands, and I will go back to your question, that Netherlands and Scandinavian, for example, do is they try to push the limits also on social issues. For example, if they discuss things about gender, about LGBT issues are always there, and they are portrayed for young people who face their problems, and also that's very interesting. Because it's not like they make a cinema protected, you know, by a glass, like, oh my God, we cannot talk about this. Mm-hmm. We show, for example, like 12 years ago, 15 years ago, we show movies in the competition of another festival in the Lisboa. We show some movies that they were really far. I mean, they are really pushing the limits. Sometimes as a programmer, I said, oh my God, what's going to happen? But I think it's so important to show this film. And was wonderful the reaction of the audience. They really understand when they get out when they get out of the room. They talk about it, they discuss it, and then go to schools and they discuss that with the teachers and with the parents. And I think that's very important. I think in Portugal there are no real interest on producing films for children, and I think that's basic on. Of course, nobody will tell you that. It's like as a screenwriter. It's like the importance of the screenwriting. Mm-hmm. Everybody say, oh my God, we have to film, the screenwriting is so important, but then they don't really care. We have to have it there, but it's not really important, even if nobody tells that. I think personally, from my experience, and because I know I have gray hair, so I have some experience on that. Not that I'm clever, I just have gray hair. You know, it's like the devil. It's not clever because he's the devil, but because he was very old. Okay, I'm getting there now. I'm getting there. So, from my experience, I think most of the when we're talking about children, art for children, and I mean literature, cinema, etc. I think there is this condescending look also on the authors and on the things. So the demand in Portuguese we'd say exigência is less. First of all, is less. They don't really, they will never tell you that, but I think in many cases they think, oh, it's okay, it's just for the children. And if this is an author of children, it's not probably a great author. And we know that's not true. We know we have wonderful actors and we have very lousy ones, like we have in cinema in general, right? So I think we have, you mentioned before about the change of mindsetting. I think we do need the change of mindsetting. We do need, we will never, it's amazing that we don't have one film for children. The closest we have was many years ago, and it's not intended for children. It was called Adeus Pai, from Luís Filipe Rocha, that you might know. It was a beautiful film. To me, it was not for children, but the children love it also. And that's the closest thing we had, and like really working, really good, you see. And it's amazing. In 2023, we don't have because nobody cared. And even you can see they discussed that, and I finish now. They discussed that in the previous panel about it's amazing that our funds for cinema, they don't have specific for children, specific application for children. They don't have, they had in the past for short films and for TV series. And then they just close all of that, and now if you want to do something for children, you do it on the animation. And that's it, which is another mistake because animation doesn't have to be for children, as we all know.
Yeah.
Okay, so changing of mindset.
Okay, Maria Emilia, how do you look at all this problem with we don't have movies being made for children, but you were one of the persons that were responsible for one of the big hits in television for children, and it was an only experience by that time that all considered there was more money to do Rua Sésamo there than there is. It's almost the money that there is now for everything in RTP2. So the budget of national TV is being reduced for that. How do you see these priorities being considered?
Well, you just said it. Bom dia a todos os colegas de mesa, aos organizadores, à Catarina, à Teresa e a todos os que estão presentes. It's true, in Portugal it seems to be up and down, up and down. I remember when I got to Portugal after the 25th of April, theatre, there was very few books written for children being made. There were some from the past, but present. And also theatre was very boring. There was some place for children. And then suddenly in theatre, Brazilian group, José Caldas, and it was wonderful, and he picked up Cecília Meirelles and made wonderful plays that children, but also the parents like to see. And you also suddenly you had the big hit in literature for pre-teens with Ana Magalhães and Isabel Alçada, who still go on, and not only, there was also Alice Vieira and so on. So, but now, for example, who is, I don't know. And with television, it was like that too. There were some programs. There was a big hit, which was the night program when children were supposed to go to bed, and there was Vitinho. I don't know if you remember. That was a big hit. And then with Rua Sésamo, for me it was also, when I accepted to do it as an educational director, it was also in the hope of discovering the secret of Rua Sésamo, of Sesame Street, of the American version. Why did it become so famous, and the secret of its endurance, because you still have Sesame Street in the States. And I'll tell you the things that I discovered and that coincided with Portugal. First, there was a timing. There was a period of time where there was a big interest in social issues. It was the civic rights movement, and there were studies that showed that you had also the beginning of statistics and education. You realized that only 30% of American children or less had access to preschool education, and you had statistics that showed how children in school, the way they did in school, their schooling was como é que se diz prejudicado?
Was
Injured, more or less, okay, was touched negatively by the social belonging of children. Children who came from poor homes had much less chances in school than the other ones. Children who belonged to minority groups, and especially Black and Latino groups, had much less chances of succeeding in school and going on to high school and so on, than children from middle class homes. Okay, so there was, and also there was, this was a period, this in the States was in the beginning of the 60s, 1961 or 60. There was this period where television was everywhere. Everybody saw television. So there was this lady, Ganscuni, she observed how children loved advertising, those little sketches of advertisement. And so she had this idea of making a sort of a preschool on television that would attract children and had a rhythm, a quick rhythm like advertising, and to have the best writers, the best animators, the best designers, and so on. But that would be conducted by an educational curriculum. Okay. So this was in the States, and this worked very well, and is still working. In Portugal, it was much later, so it was in the 80s, second half of the 80s, but the situation was quite similar, because we only have 30 children with access to preschool education. We had decolonized, and we were receiving lots of people from the former colonies. So we had big groups of children who had a difficult access to Portuguese culture. Sometimes even the mother language was not the same. And we also have many children of retornados. And so, and we had also these studies that showed that children in schools did much less well if they came from these minority groups and from poorer homes. So the timing was very good, I think. The second thing is that we had the American experience behind, so we could lay on their experience, we could lay on some of their material. We used about half of their material, the other half was done here. We had, and we had people on television that were all very interested in this idea. We had in the Conselho de Administração, the administration, Brás Teixeira, Dr. Brás Teixeira, who was a very cultivated man and very interested in education. We had it as head of the first channel of the programs, Carlos Pinto Coelho, whose mother was a teacher, and he was always very interested in education and teaching. So there was, and probably there was a lot of money, but I don't know about the money, where it came from and why we had so much money then. Anyway, there was all these people, and so they were very, and we had in the international sector Fernando Lopes, as you know well, certainly. He was a Portuguese director, but also somebody interested in education and whom I knew very well. So he was the one who invited me to become educational director. And so that was, the timing was good. There were lots of goodwills. The coordinator was Carla Oliveira, who had been head of archives and library at television. All these people together were people who were interested in it and who invested in it. I had been working with television, although I worked in education, I had been working with television in the sense of trying to know which programs would be suitable and interesting for children in schools and so on.
And Maria, what do you think changed? Now we don't have so much, that kind of investments.
Yeah.
Why?
I know. That I don't know. First, I think there's no money for public television. Then the importance that television had is not as strong now, because they have access to, they have this.
Online, like Sesame Street online now.
Yeah.
So, but you think there was never such a strong investment as at that time? Never
There
repeated?
was never, no, I don't
Okay.
think there was ever.
Okay.
Also, there are two other things that I think we could have kept and we didn't, which is the educational, what I think Sesame did is it proved that you could link education and creation together without making it neither boring nor not just anything. And then we had a research group
Okay.
who tried to see if children understood what was told, if they liked, if their attention was kept, if they understood, and if they learned. And you gave that feedback to writers and to directors.
And it was still on time to make changes because it was a long-term show. Okay, we're now shifting to books, and we'll be talking again, I think, about cinema and television, but the theme of the debate is mainly books. So we move to Carla. Carla has one of the most interesting children books, House of Printing. So how do you see the moment now for children books? It's a good moment. It's not the same as cinema. Cinema, we just come to the conclusion that is obvious that there is no movies for children being made. What about the books? It's a good time for making books for children in Portugal?
Bom dia a todos, desculpem, ainda não tinha cumprimentado e obrigada pelo convite. Well, I could answer in general saying it's always a good moment for children's books. But concerning Portugal, and in the last years we have seen a big growth in picture books, and that's mostly what I do, as you see here. In Portuguese é o álbum ilustrado, and we are really trying to how do you say, to have people use this word, album, illustrated album, because there's a whole difference of books that were done maybe 15 years, even 10 years ago. I would say 15 years ago, because the image came to have a big importance, let's say. So the visual text has now an importance in picture books that many times surpasses the verbal text, let's say. And I'm saying this just to make a connection to the theme of the conversation, which is writing for children. And so what we have now is we have wonderful illustrators. We have really high quality illustrators in this country. And every time Bologna Book Fair, Bologna Children's Book Fair is approaching, it's next week. And every time we go, there are people coming to see our books, the books of Orfeomini, which is the collection of Patologico, of Planeta Tangerina, Bruat, etc. And the market has developed a lot in the last years, and with all these publishing houses going to a kind of, picture book that is also like a cross between graphic design, illustration, contemporary art. So I think we are building a different narrative in picture books, and things are really developing. Until COVID, things were really growing, like with my publishing house, and we also publish essays, contemporary art essays, and essays on gender and post-colonial studies. And this was the basis of the publishing house in 2007. But when I started the picture book collection in 2008, it actually grew almost organically. Because, so now maybe we do 30 picture books a year, and we do 10 essays a year.
You're talking about illustration, but you talked also about book design, and I think that's one of the secrets too, because when everything is becoming digital, and you think what is left for the printing book, and the printing book needs to be an object. So that happens a lot in children's book, is the book becoming a visual and conceptual design thing, that it's not replaceable by digital thing, right?
Oh, that I'm sure about.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's exactly because many times people would ask me, even with the essays, they would say, why don't you go for an e-book? And I would say, never. Me, e-book, never. I need the paper, I need the materials, I need to touch, I need to choose the materials. I need them many times also to stay raw like this.
Yeah, for instance, there is no way of putting digital a concept like this reclining book, or
I
the
hope
book,
not.
or the boy that eats the book, and we can see there is a bite in the book,
Exactly, there is
right?
a bite.
And that's
In the back
not
cover.
only illustration, but also designed concept of books that made book a real object that you can't replace for digital. And what about the stories? Are they developed the same way? The growth that we observed in illustration, we have a very good generation of illustrators. Do we have also a great generation of storytellers?
No.
Okay, simple question.
I can develop that, but the answer is no. And that's one of the things in the last years that it's, because we had a generation of very good writers in Portugal, but for a certain kind of book. So that was more, let's say, in the times where illustration played a second role and just was kind of literal towards the text. So the text was the king, let's say. And when things changed, it's very different to write for an album, to write for a picture book, because you really have to have a dialogue between the images and the text. And sometimes they say the same thing, sometimes they say different things, and sometimes they, one surpasses the other. It's a challenge, and it's a totally different dynamic. So I think there's a lack of writers for children's books at the moment, and there's
But that's national or internationally speaking?
I don't know internationally.
But when you go to a fair like Bologna,
because
they
the
look
French,
more...
they seem to produce books and stories.
Yep.
In Bologna, they look more for the graphic of the book, the image, or for the story?
Well, me as a publisher, publisher and editor of, I always look for a balance of both. But let's say that the text many times is there kind of to, how do you say, para marcar ritmo, to mark
So
a
it's
pace.
like in the songs, music is more important no matter what they're saying.
The best is that the two really explode, no? That the two are really strong.
Yeah.
Just to finish, there's one thing that I started to do in our Filmini collection, which is to invite illustrators to write. So you will see many of our illustrators have books in other, or some of the illustrators have books in other publishing houses, and they are not the authors of the text.
But you don't invite writers to draw.
No.
No, you
So
better
as a
don't
writer,
do that.
They're like the writer of the narrative many times, as maybe in a film, I don't know. They are the writers of the narrative, and me as an editor, I work the text with them.
Okay.
And so many times...
I would like to have a comment with Possidónio, because he's a writer.
As a writer,
like
I
to
have
say
to
something
think
too,
about
actually.
that.
What you're saying is that,
I would like to say-
everybody can write.
Yeah, everybody
but
can write, but nobody can.
No, but I'm not saying that.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
know.
saying
You
that.
said you could not find it. Well, let me just say, I would like to say two things. One, maybe the writers are there, maybe we need to find him. Okay?
I'm sure they will be there.
That's my experience in many, around the writing, in many areas, including the script writing. They are there, but sometimes they have difficult to arrive to us, and we don't know them, so we keep working with the same. But I would like to tell you something about my own experience that maybe it's interesting because you talk about image. Last year I finished my first, let's say, children's novel. A big novel, something that people usually don't dare to do because it will have like 300 pages, and then I already have usually work with a publishing house, which is Penguin, and so I deliver them that book. Well, there are two things. One I will not tell, but what I would like to tell is this: when I finish that book, actually even before I finish that book, which is this story with a universe and different things, something that I never wrote before. I was always wondering, oh, should I invite someone to add some kind of illustrations in the middle, work with the text also? I know it's for older audience, because like probably kids from after 10, 12, whatever. But I felt that all the time, oh, that could be interesting if I just have someone just also working with my text and adding something. And that's very interesting because that's also changed that I'm not attached only to the text for myself. The other thing is, as I said, I finished this book like 1 year ago. And what happened usually was when I finish, I'm a lucky one, when I finish my novels, usually my publishing house immediately publish it. Like 2 months, 3 months after, we do the thing. And this one's still there. And it's very interesting. Why? Because I can feel, or when they said, oh, it's good, it's good. They could say it's lousy, but they said it's good. But they still fighting with what am I going to do, how I'm going to work a book that is from an author that always worked for adult audiences. And suddenly this crazy guy decided to create something with more fantasy and magic and children and things. What am I going to do with this object? And I feel they are fighting, struggling with the mind setting.
Okay.
And so I think next year I will be there, not unpublished yet.
Does a children's books have to have images to be a success?
No, but I think that's the whole issue. Like in Holland, we have a very big culture for children. So also in children's books for a long time already. Like the author I told you about, the first films we made of, she wrote already from the child's perspective in the 50s of last century. So I think that's a big difference, like in Holland and maybe also in Sweden, Denmark, that we already almost 75 years ago, people started writing from the perspective of a child. And I think that's what inspired us for making all these films. And I like to add what you said about if it's a good film, it's a good film. I like it too, of course, because we all were children. So if you make a good, well-made children's film, adults will like it. And that's the kind of film I like to make, and also I try to make it interesting for adults too. But if you have a story with, you always have a conflict in it, and you have the child's perspective. Of course, the parents are always the conflicting party. So it's very easy to write stories with a child because you always have conflict in it.
Sometimes I have the feeling, but I would like you to comment on that, I have the feeling that most of the most famous children's books are not for children, are for parents that remember that they were children.
Yeah, maybe. And I would like to add also that, like what you said about, it's interesting. I'm sure in Portugal there will be writers who can write from the child's perspective, from a Portuguese child. I'm sure, but it's just the mindset from the people that it's important you write these stories, and that's where it all starts. And that's and I think it's really, really important to tell your own stories. It's crazy that you let your children only watch the Disney animation films. It's really stupid, I think.
Yeah, but Emilia,
makes me angry.
Your experience with education and about the books that are being recommended and used in schools. Do you think they are doing a good job on choosing the books to children in schools, or there's a lot that can be done?
Well, I think there are two things. Thank you. There are two things that can be said. One is, in general, I think our education is still too much receptive and doesn't invite children to produce, whether with their hands or writing or with literature. I'm sorry if there are literature teachers here and that this is unfair, I don't know, but I remember and I noticed that people, adolescents are still taught in a way like I was 100 years ago, which is too much history of literature. You know about the authors, which current they belong to, what style they have, and so on, and not so much reading the whole book and discussing among yourselves, which I think is what is needed for teenagers and for children in general. That's one thing. The other thing is they are not so much invited to write themselves stories, to be inventive, to be creative, and so on. And there was a third thing which I forgot. I'm sorry.
But the big question that always is put on this kind of debate is why, how can we make children read more in a time where they spend all the time playing games in the computer? How is it still possible to convince them that reading is a good idea? Because we all have the experience. All of us, we had contact with children, that it's more and more difficult to make them read a book because they are being surrounded by screens. Mm-hmm. So what do we need to do?
But that's also a reason that you have to make good content for the screens. But that's another...
Yeah, that's another thing.
Yeah, but maybe you can...
Yeah.
Well, I don't have the answer for that, but I can add something. I think in the last years concerning small children, the National Reading Plan has done something for this country, really. I mean, of course, I will not talk about it, but after a while it's a list of recommendations that come out every year and suddenly are not updated, and the teachers are still telling or trying to work with a book that it's sold out and things like this. But apart from that, I think it has done a lot for the reading and for the importance of reading since children are
But
small.
then there's a time when they stop reading.
That's what I was going to say after. It's so, and that's why you see also the children's books, the picture books, and that's why you see the market growing, because people are buying books, actually. And I usually say that's what saved us from the crisis in 2008 and on, and that's during COVID also, because children were at home. And I think Emilia touched a very, very important point, which is also how literature is taught at school. Because I have a teenager at home who's 17, and of course his mom brought books from everywhere in the world, and he had books all the time, and he started reading very early and things like this until he was 10, 11, 12 maybe. During summer we were still going to book fairs wherever, in Tavira, wherever we were for a holiday, and he was buying a book and he was proud to say, "Mom, I'm finished." But that was finished also at 12.
So even the son of an editor doesn't read.
And he's into PlayStation, football, things like this. Yeah, he goes to the cinema here and there. But I feel that when he comes from high school and says, "Mom, I have to read this book and I have to read this book, and this is a pain in the ass," and then he looks for the summaries. I mean,
do you have the same problem in Netherlands and Holland?
My children the same thing.
Do we have?
My daughter not.
We should
but my
say
boys.
Netherlands or Holland.
I say the Netherlands. I think.
The Netherlands.
Holland sounds a little bit
Okay.
national. Yeah, I don't
Okay,
know.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So
the Netherlands, it's okay.
The Netherlands.
No,
okay.
I have the same problem with my children. My daughter is the only one who reads a little bit, but I think that's a total different discussion. Yeah, but I think it makes it more. If children watch a lot of things on television, online, and that's why I think it's important to make good things for them, because you can't say it's not important. It's important, and children, they learn from everything you show them.
Yeah, but you're saying that we have to focus on the visual screen thing.
No, well,
and
that's
books
my,
is a part of that, but
I write books also because I think I love to read, but I have to admit that the last 10 years I read less because there's so much to watch on the streamers and everything.
Okay.
But maybe that's not the moment. But I would like to inspire people by showing some.
Oh yes,
trailers,
we have.
Then you can see.
We have things to show. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to see
otherwise-
several things now, Katerina.
So where shall we start, Katerina?
Not only from Tamara, but also from the others, I think. Okay, let's look at the trailer.
Yeah, but which one shall we
Yeah.
start? Maybe that's interesting. Mr. Frog is a film. Well, actually, they're all adaptations from books, but the first one is from a really popular book in the Netherlands, and that's the most commercial film also.
Okay, let
So
me
I'll
just.
show you.
So
Yeah.
okay, so we have Mr. Frog.
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah. Then I think we go to Fidgety Bram.
Okay.
And then the last one is Romy Salon. That's the most art house.
And we,
So you
we
can
see little trailers of that.
Yeah, little trailers, but it's interesting because we started with popular book adaptations, and that gave us the space to make more films with more depth.
Okay. After that, we go to some questions that can be made from the audience. You have
started already.
the other ones have anything to show too? No, nothing to show.
Stop.
Yeah.
But now it already started.
Okay.
Yeah. We need sound.
So this is the trailer of the first movie.
Lekker bandmeester.
Oh, dan moet je achterop. Anders kom je te laat. Dan wordt de meeste kwaad.
Kan toch wel wat harder? Kom op! Eerste!
Mijn spreekbeurt gaat over kikkers. De kikker is groen, hij heeft 4 poten en kan heel ver springen.
Ik ben anders dan andere mensen. Meestal zie ik eruit zoals nu. Maar soms dan ben ik groen. Glad. 4 pootjes.
Wat doet hij die trucmeester? Meester? De meester is een kikker.
Je bent echt te groot voor dit soort sprookjes.
Waar is meester Frans?
Naar de wc.
Er ging iets fout.
Geen misstap. Het schoolbestuur zal jou ontslaan. Je moet
Altijd op je hoede zijn. Je kan zomaar worden opgegeten.
Door wie?
Door een ooievaar.
Moordenaar.
Willen jullie mij daar alsjeblieft bij helpen?
Hij wil de meester opeten!
Kikkers zijn vieze modderkruipers.
Dat ik zo'n meester had. Voelt het zich wel goed?
Meester, gaat het?
Yeah, well, this was a film that did well in cinema, and it was co-produced with Germany and Belgium, I think.
And it was made when? In 10 years ago?
5 years ago, I think.
25?
2015 or something. 16.
Okay.
Sorry. But this film was also on festivals all around the world. So and now we go to Fidgety Bram. That's more a film with some more depth, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hallo wereld, hier ben ik, Brammetje.
Bram?
Mijn hersenen zitten nooit stil.
Bram.
En ik daarom ook niet, denk ik.
Bram!
Ik hou van uitvindingen. In mijn uitvindingenschrift staat de wc op 85. En de Game Boy op nummer 25. Ik heb veel vragen in mijn hoofd. Bijvoorbeeld, waarom is melk wit? En hoe zou het zijn als je geen handen hebt? In groep 3 ga je echte dingen leren. Wat voor dingen? Alles.
Meester P. Vis.
Meester P. Vis. Die moet zeker in mijn goede namenschrift.
Bram.
Hallo, meester Pis.
Nou, Bram.
Een losse tand is irritant. Moet je heel zachtjes draaien. Kom.
Hij is voortdurend met andere dingen bezig.
Oh, Bram.
Ik heb je nou 3 keer gevraagd om op te letten.
Oké. Er moet echt iets veranderen.
Kijk, hier staan de dingen die we doen. Netjes eten, luisteren, rustig zijn, op tijd gaan slapen, opschieten.
Krijg ik nu een strafpunt?
Misschien moet je toch nog beter je best doen.
Ja, maar dat doe ik ook. Ik word zo moe van mijn hoofd. Ik kan mijn hoofd niet uitzetten, snap je? Ik kan maar beter naar een andere school gaan. Kan je daar dan wel stilzitten?
Druk zijn, dat is echt niet erg. Maar je moet wel leren luisteren.
Als mijn raketbus af is, dan vlieg ik weg. Heel ver weg van hier.
Oké, even van de stoelen. We gaan springen en roltreden. Even los. Kom maar.
Yeah, well, I like to say something about this film because it's, well, like you can see, it's about a boy who can't sit still, but also a boy who has a lot of questions in his mind. But this film actually is also used by a lot of psychologues in the Netherlands, because when parents sometimes have a child like this, who's very, and this film really explains how it works in their head. It's because I have a husband and 2 sons with these problems, I could make this film. So, but it also had more than 100,000 visitors in the cinema, which is really good.
So it started in cinemas and then it moved to television, or?
It's also shown on television, and actually it's also on it was on Netflix.
Okay.
So that's also, if you make things who are, I think, strong and are good. I just got a picture from somebody who showed his daughter was in a cinema film, watching a film I wrote 25 years ago. So if you make good content, you can use it again and again, because every year there are new children.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes.
You understand?
Yes.
So, and then the last one is the most art house one, and it had also the less visitors, but I think it's my best film. But it also won, it traveled all around the world. For example, it was in Poland in an educational program, also in Germany, also in Belgium, I think. So that's also a value, I think, for humanity, but also you show something of your own country. Like Mr. Frog, you see really Holland, some part of Holland that's really nice, I think.
Okay.
So, well, yeah.
5 dagen per week, met soms een nachtdienst. Ik zit nu wel met een oppasprobleem. Zou jij niet kunnen helpen? Ik?
Nee. Kan ik niet naar papa? Kan ik naar school echt niet naar jou?
Ben je er nou al? Deur dicht voor de poes.
Moet je ook boven blijven? Past die anders een stuk?
Nee, oud. En met deze zit ik zeker de komende 20 jaar goed. Oh, blijf je nog zo lang doorwerken, Stine? Ja? Waarom niet?
Omdat je al best oud bent.
Verdwijnt geld. Ik weet zeker dat ik alles op de bank heb gezet. Het hoofd van mij. Wat ging we ook weer doen?
Thee maken.
Dan is mijn hoofd weer heel vol. Dan opeens weer helemaal leeg. Maar dit, dat je... Zo.
Oma moet gewoon een beetje voor zich laten zorgen.
Door mij.
Ook door jou.
Ben je verdrietig?
Als ik maar niet dement ben, dan krijgt u terug... Juist, precies. Nou, kijk eens. Oh nee, toen niet. Als ik jou toch niet had.
Mijn moeder was kapster.
Ah, ik ben kapster.
Wat doe jij nou hier?
Ik heb de zaak gesloten.
Wat nou als er mensen geknipt willen worden?
Nou, hebben ze pech gehad.
Kom.
Mam, jij hebt echt iets.
Met Romy erbij gaat het prima.
Ja!
Jij moet naar school.
Maar wat is nou belangrijker? Oma of school?
Als ik er niet meer ben, dan wil ik heel erg graag dat dit jouw kapsalon wordt. En dan doen we het kapsalon Romy. Is dat wat?
Veel plezier.
Veel plezier. Slijmbal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have.
This is about Alzheimer's disease. This
Okay.
film. Yeah.
Okay. So this was supported by public money.
Yeah, and it's also by broadcast. It was actually this week on television.
Okay.
But
And
it was difficult to finance it.
Okay.
Because it seems like Holland is a heaven. It's not, of the Netherlands. It took me also 5 years to finance this film, and the script was rejected several times. And then I said, okay, I'm writing a book. So then I wrote the book, and then I wrote a new version of the script, and then we got the money.
And
Yeah.
it was in a special contest section, like children's stories, or it was in the normal
No,
finance.
we asked money at the children's section.
There is a children's section.
Yeah.
And that's where you get the money
There we
from.
got the money, but the film was appreciated also by grown-ups, and actually at the Dutch Film Festival, which is for all films,
Yeah.
we got 4 awards for best film, best
Okay.
script, oh no, best direction, best script.
What's the budget? You have an idea? How many?
I'm really bad at it, but I think
An
this was
idea.
not a bad budget because we also had, because she takes her grandmother to Denmark,
Yeah.
so we had to travel to Germany. We got money from Germany.
But we're talking about 1 million euros, 2 million euros.
I think close to 2 million. I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's a lot because we just
Yeah.
made a film 1.6 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Please.
But, yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to. I like to speak. I'm sorry. I will try. I will try to be brief. But I was watching because what we discussed before. What would be interesting for the children? Why would they go to the cinema? Why would they pay? Why would they want to be? Not just the parents push them. Okay. And if you see, especially the 2 movies that you showed before, they were taught from the point of view of the children. So it's what is interesting for a child. What is fun for them? It's fun that my teacher suddenly is a frog.
Yeah.
And they make a lot of weird movements. Oh, that would be so fun. I want to see that as a child. If I was a child anymore. But you see, my child in my head is talking now.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, what is fun in the other movie? So there is the bad guy, and then they just pull the trunks and they see the underwear of the teacher. That's so stupid. That's so fun. You see, and that's thinking from the head of a child.
Yeah.
And what I feel sometimes, even in literature and in cinema, is you are thinking as an educator, as a mother, as a father, but you are not seeing from the eyes of the children. And I think the secret would be that.
That's true.
Okay.
I think so. That's true.
Yeah. And in Portugal, you'll never get money for
No, you
a
will
movie,
not get movie.
because you cannot not justify
No, you cannot.
in terms of.
You cannot.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We have also other things to show from Carla.
Yeah, just 2 minutes. I wanted to go back to 2 or 3 things just to finish. One of the things is the teenagers not reading so much. And maybe, because we didn't talk really about solutions, and maybe we have to create spaces where they can go and relate to the book. Because, for example, in our bookshop, Baobab, it's a bookshop of illustrated books. But there is a bigger section for children, although you also find for adults and for teenagers. Teenagers hardly go to the bookshop. And so another story from my son, he was 12 and we had some activity in the bookshop, and I said he had to go. And he invited his friends, and of course they like to eat, so there's always, you know, things to eat when there's events and ta-ta-ta. And suddenly I have 3 big boys sitting down with their mobiles. And I said, out. No. And then he never went there anymore. Unless he's looking for me to ask me for money, of course, because that's... So maybe we have to create specific places where they can
I have a suggestion.
discuss.
You can have like a window with all games and all
then
kinds
they
of
go
things.
in and there's
they
only
go
books.
in and the door
And you
closes
close the door.
and it's a bookshop.
Exactly.
And they're trapped. I think that would
That may be
interesting.
a good idea.
They're
But
trapped there.
reading has to be cool, right? And reading has to be cool. It has to gather them as a group. Otherwise, it's just the one that is reading and it's like, oh, he's a nerd. So I don't have many more solutions. The other thing is that when you spoke about the fact that there were no children's movies with real actors, it made me think that, yes, it's true, I'm making a lot of picture books, so it's like animation, similar to, and we don't work a lot with photography, for example, in children's books. And that made me think of that. We don't have many books with real people on them. And the French, there is a publishing house, Les Grandes Personnes, that does wonderful picture books with photography. But they have support from the the National Book Center. And photography takes a lot more, it's a lot more expensive even than this now to work on the photography, to digitalize everything, to put it in printing. And I think people are still not so used to this in Portugal. I would love to do picture books with photography, but it's not easy. The third thing is about the little book trailer we're going to see, which is from this book, The Time of the Giant. Just again, to go back to what's what's a text for children or not, what's a book for children or not. Of course, it's for children, for adults, but some people really talked about this book as more for adults than for children. And we are also working on putting down these categories at the same time in the picture book collection. But if you look at the text, you will ask yourself, why is this so much for adults? Because it's about the time and the passage of time. But I think it's a book that comes up with many questions about also these frontiers.
It's a trailer, a book trailer.
Yes.
It's on TikTok?
I don't know.
It should be on TikTok.
The girls are there.
Talk,
no, it's not on TikTok. It should be on TikTok.
Yeah. Okay.
I never looked at TikTok.
Let's see.
Nothing happened today. Neither today. And today, nothing happened. Nothing ever happens here. Nothing at all. Days are like pine trees. They all look alike. Will it always be like this?
Okay. We don't have more trailers, no? There is no more trailers, right, Katerina? Okay, let's see. Let's look. That Possidónio, make a small presentation, please.
Okay, this is a film that I wrote to Nuno. It's Os Demónios do Meu Avô, which was in competition. It's a feature film. It's the first feature film in stop motion in Portugal, and that would take many years. Yes, so I lead the writing part. Then in the end, there was this screenwriter French who also added a little bit. So
it's a trailer? Okay.
Yeah, because the other was 90 minutes, so yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now we're open to questions from the audience, please. I'll just ask you to be the more concise you can, so that we can answer all.
We don't have
We don't have any Blyton book.
Yeah, we don't have one book that is a reference for every children and that we're proud of. We never did. So that's a big problem. In the Netherlands, you have a few. Then about the financing, because it's all. Uma Enid Blyton, escritora do Nodi.
Yeah. We don't have a bestseller in okay.
We don't have it.
We have Coleção Uma Aventura, no?
No, it's not the same.
Okay.
It's not exactly the same. But many kids read Uma Aventura because the school makes them. It's not something that we look for. It's not something that's in our culture. Another thing is the funding. It's really, really important. The system in the Netherlands is quite different from ours. It's a film fund, not an institute, and has a lot of different things. They have agreements with Belgium, Luxembourg, Denmark, Netherlands for the financing. It's completely different.
I know.
It would be a huge conversation about film funding. So we don't have the basis to make that movie. Possidónio, we work together. I give a lot of value to people who write for children. For the last 8 years, I read between 5 to 20 scripts per year, between series and feature films and shorts. And I can tell you that less than 10% is for children in Portugal. And even those need a lot of work. So we have a big problem in the script writing. We talked about this when you were Secretary of State. It's a big problem in Portugal. We need to invest a lot more in writing and in having better writers to have those stories that will make great movies, great books, great whatever. About Sesame Street, nowadays RTP2, and you know about this better than I do, has 200,000 euros for children production, everything, buy, produce, everything. And Channel 1 has that to do one episode of a live action series. So that's the difference. We don't invest in culture for children. This is a problem, this is the reality. It happened always, except for those golden years. Thank you for the work done there. We don't invest in culture for children. We don't invest in culture because when they grow up, they won't see Portuguese culture, they'll see some other culture that it's the one they saw through all their lives. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, obrigado.
Eu vou, boa tarde, eu vou falar em português, certo? dar os parabéns ao painel e é mais um comentário, algumas dúvidas também. A Maria Emília Brederode dos Santos referiu, a propósito da aprendizagem ou da desaprendizagem da literatura, o que é ler um livro e o mesmo se pode colocar o que é ler um filme. E isto remete, tem uma ancoragem que é o sistema e a forma padronizada que temos na descodificação das obras. E, portanto, se essa forma, e portanto estamos a falar de todo um sistema de ensino, e há belíssimos exemplos de professores na oposição, enfim, desta massificação. O que eu quero dizer é que se há esta forma massificada de descodificação das obras, elas não são abertas, como diria o Humberto Eco, portanto também não potenciam a autonomia, a imaginação, são obras cadáveres, não é? E o que eu acho é que o que é mais importante é de facto aquilo que já estava patente e que ficou levantado no painel anterior, como é que é possível possibilitar, do ponto de vista pedagógico, sem que se instrumentalizem as obras, essa experiência estética de fruição, de ler um livro, de ler um filme. E, portanto, eu acho que talvez seja necessário nós adultos fazermos um exercício de desaprendizagem para estarmos, de facto, abertos à mudança, e a mudança a vários níveis. Era só este comentário que queria fazer.
Obrigado. Vamos ouvir os comentários todos e depois, no fim, fazemos uma ronda final.
Ok, posso também falar? Então, boa tarde a todos, porque já é boa tarde, não é? Agradecer também aqui o painel e a iniciativa ao Festival Play, porque, de facto, é muito importante este momento de um primeiro encontro sobre esta temática, não é? Esperamos que possa haver muitos mais daqui para a frente. E pronto, posicionar aqui um bocadinho questões que já foram colocadas e que me parece que são fundamentais. Portanto, enquanto naquilo que tenho feito ultimamente, tenho estado várias vezes em conferências, com escolas de cinema, com os departamentos, né, das escolas de cinema, onde estão alunos, estudantes de cinema, e de facto é preciso criar aqui, incentivar este nicho de produção, não é? Junto dos criadores, dos jovens cineastas, portanto, daqueles que estão a começar a fazer cinema, porque não é uma área que lhes apareça como algo que possam fazer. E aqui vou ao encontro um bocadinho também do que o Possidónio Cachapa disse há bocadinho, porque de facto se às vezes temos problemas relativamente à leitura, e a leitura pode sentir-se com o seu paradigma ameaçado, então, quando chegamos ao cinema e ao audiovisual, bem, nós estamos no epicentro de uma mudança de paradigma cultural, não é? Que é esta emergência das linguagens todas do audiovisual, e a escola não tem muita percepção disto. Não é culpa da escola, não é? É porque são linguagens novas, estamos, de facto, num turbilhão muito grande de mudança, e, portanto, não é suficiente, por exemplo, haver um Plano Nacional de Cinema. É preciso uma intervenção muito mais profunda, não é? Ao nível de mudar um pouco a nossa cultura e as nossas mentalidades e depois as nossas políticas públicas relativamente ao reconhecimento de que a área do cinema e do audiovisual são uma área como outra qualquer. Não é? Okay. Que tem que ser encarada como tal no sistema educativo. Obrigada.
Não sei se há só mais uma última, and then we'll do a final round. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Rafael Afonso. I come from a Portuguese producing company called Ocubar Films. I have a kind of a general question for the writers and producers. Which do you think is the more not difficult but challenging project to make? Write a children's book or a young adult novel, or adapting it to a feature? It's that.
Okay, obrigado. So we'll do a final. So I'll start with Tamara.
Give an answer on the question.
Okay.
I think writing a book is much easier, because you only have one person at the publishing company who's reading and you're talking to. When you're writing a film script, it can be very annoying because you have all these committees, you have the broadcaster, it drives you crazy. But when it finally works out, it's really satisfying because then you can see these actors play, and then when it works, but sometimes it's really hard. And then I prefer to write a book because it's nice and easy on my own, I can do what I want. So that's the answer.
And for concluding?
Yeah, I can understand, like what you said, that in Portugal the situation is totally different, but I also, that's why I like to inspire, because I think by doing this 25 years ago in Holland, we also stimulated the film industry as a whole thing, because children who watch Dutch children films, they also go to see Dutch adult, well, not adult, grown-up films. So it stimulated the complete industry, and I know film is a case of money, so you also always have to inspire the people who give the money. So, yeah. Because I think the people who like these stories, they don't need to be inspired, they know that it's important, but I think you have to, well, if you have economical argument, that can help sometimes. Yeah. And it's important, so please develop it.
Maria Emilia, para concluir.
Well, I'll catch it from there, and to say that to defend that it should be a team work, and that what I mean is, okay, there are authors who are genius and who can transmit and write a story like a child that resonates with a child and resonates with an adult and so on. But you can also try to listen to children. In the other panel, they were talking about that too. It's not so much, you can ask people who know about children, but you can also try to listen to children, or to have a teamwork with people who know how to listen to children, because authors very often are like teachers. They tell children what they would like to hear them say, okay? So that's one thing. The other thing is that you were talking also about how to work, how the text changed. It's not so much from text to illustration. Now that Carla, I think, was telling how it starts often now with the albums, with illustration, and then there is the text too. So I would defend a teamwork between illustrators and writers, and if it's a movie, with directors and actors from the very beginning. And that's something I didn't say about Sesame Street, which I thought was very important. Two things. One, it started much sooner. We had time to prepare. We had time to listen to people. We had time to talk with children. And we had time to work together, from the educational director to the actors, at least to the writers and the directors. And that, I think, it was the whole time teamwork. I think that was very important, and that is now very important, because, as you said, everything is changing, and it's changing so fast that you have to be on top of it all the time, I think. The other thing was that what I was saying in my other intervention, there were three things and I forgot the third, but now I remembered it because I think Carla Cerqueira said it, which is how it's school, in this case school, I think, should not so much use books and to have children serve books, or to have children serve cinema, but the opposite. Books that interest you. You must at least start by that, and also at about 12, when children forget about books, you have to work on that sense. It's interesting to children that may choose it, and not so much because in the history of literature or in the history of cinema, those were the very important masterworks that everyone should know. Okay, that's for later. You have a whole life for that. But while you are a child, you have to be interested in it, and then so it must go to the children, up to them, to let them choose. For example, here you were mentioning the National Plan of Literature, which has done a very good job in schools, but also I would add also the school libraries movement that also created libraries in every agrupamento, né? And now it went on to do it also in some school, even primary schools. And I can't help remembering that children in preschool, for example, where they can choose the corners where they go, that there were children who won't ask their parents to go earlier because they wanted to go to the library corner, and if they arrived late, somebody else had got it. So this enthusiasm with books you can only get if you can choose them, and if you can, and so I think this should be kept throughout schooling, throughout teenager life too.
Obrigado, Maria. Carla, só para finalizar.
So now it's me that take Emilia's words and go to what you said exactly about and retain this idea about books that really stimulate and thrive your imagination and the aesthetical, I don't know if you say it in English, fruition, of reading and of being, joy of being with the book. With the national, with the cinema, já estou cansada, National Plan for Cinema. It's interesting also what you said, because sometimes when you're not a teacher, for example, you don't understand what kind of difficulties also teachers can have with certain things that are new. And one of the things that interests me very much is the crossing of languages. So maybe it would be the time also for schools to not only work with the film as a film, but also the film in connection to a book. It doesn't have to be the book that was the basis of the film, but to do these kind of connections between theater and a book. Katarina, for example, she did a book for us which came from a theater play, and then to put it in the book, to transform it into a book, she realized she couldn't use the same colors, for example, because we said, no, this is not working. So it had to be changed. There was no more photography anymore, actually. So to also work in this crossing space. And I remember I gave classes many years ago at University of the Algarve, and I had these Portuguese culture students, and we had to go through Viagens na Minha Terra from Almeida Garrett. And suddenly I thought, how am I going to get my students interested in this book that they don't want to read anymore, because of course people get an idea, oh, this is, not from now. And so what I did was to compare it to the film Pulp Fiction, in the sense of having stories within stories within stories. And suddenly they were like this, and when I talked about Pulp Fiction, they went like this, and I was like, yes. So that's something to work on, I think.
Okay, Possidónio.
Okay, so I will answer your question, because I work in both sides, as in adaptation. I did adaptation, and I also write my own books. And also in my academic works are focused on adaptation. So my PhD thesis is on adaptation. So, and what I could tell you is, your question was what is more difficult. And as you said, it's easier for me to write a book, and I ask nobody about it, right? But maybe it's not published after that, or maybe it's not a success. If you do an adaptation, yes, it's a teamwork, and also what you said about working in teams, I do believe that in many areas. I do believe that if you talk to people, if they give you feedback, if they say, oh, it's better this way, you learn more, you go further in a more interesting ways. I would just like to conclude with one thing, because about why they stop reading when they are around 12, let's say it. or maybe sometimes 10, okay? Yeah, they do stop reading, but that's not a new thing. Like in the end of 90s, they already stopped reading at that age. And then one day, there was this woman who was bad treated by her husband in Porto, and then she picked her manuscript and she went to London and she tried to publish a book. And she published a book that she's called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And what we see in the years after that, liking or not liking the books, that's not the question here, is we saw millions of teenagers reading 800 pages books, 400, 500, 800, which is huge. You cannot imagine that you go to your teenage son and say, oh, here's 400 pages for you to read. And they say, what? No, that will take me forever. And they did it because somehow she mixed things, she picked imagination, history, and she created something that was so interesting that 2 days ago, I was teaching in the university in the course of animation, and then my students were very excited because it's always very fun for us to be there in class. That's my thing, that doesn't matter now. But then they said, oh, I have a question, professor, I have a question. And you expect something academic question, right? And they said, are you a Gryffindor? What is your thing? Just tell us. And then I said, oh no, this is like the football thing, I will not tell you that. And then they said, okay. But then they come to me and say, 2 girls and a boy, with 19 years old around that. And they were so excited and said, please tell us. And then I say, okay, but you will not like it. Yes, I'm a Gryffindor. You think I'm a Slytherin? And they said, I'm a Slytherin too, but I knew that you were a Gryffindor. And this is in 2023 for the same book. Okay, so magic can happen if you catch the imagination of the kids. It doesn't matter what I, as an adult, think about the books of J.K. Rowling. It doesn't really matter. What it matters is they love it, they keep loving it, and she made kids read books of hundreds and hundreds of pages. And that's not a detail, and that's not easy. That's all I want to say.
Okay, so thank you everybody. Obrigado a todos por terem estado e sigam o festival agora nos próximos dias. Até à próxima. Thank you.